Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Joel from PMA, and I've got a very special treat for you today. I've got our National Brand Ambassador for Canada for the Glenfiddich, Miss Jamie Johnson. Thank you for joining us, Jamie.
Hi, thanks, Joel. Thanks for having me.
Oh, excellent. So we're going to walk through the portfolio, and I'm really excited to taste all of these Glenfiddich SKUs. I know I grew up with the Glenfiddich 12 in my household as a staple, and so for me, it's always great to get to taste all the new and exciting things that Glenfiddich is doing. So let's jump right into it.
Let's do it. Absolutely. I think you have the 14 bourbon barrel there first. So yeah, the new kid on the block, actually exclusive to the US and Canada. So really kind of, with the last, couple years being so popular, especially for American whiskeys and bourbons, it's kind of a great space to play in. So for the Bourbon Barrel Reserve, we actually worked with Kelvin Cooperage in Kentucky, and we're using some of their barrels, brand new charred American oak barrels, to finish our 14-year-old Glenfiddich in. So it's going to have a lot of those sort of bourbon-ish cues. You're going to get some of that char. You're going to get some of that really fresh American oak. You're going to get lots of vanilla and toffee, lots of caramel. And it's bright and approachable, great for, people just getting into single malts from the bourbon category, and just a really lovely, interesting kind of Scotch. You don't get this much American oak influence usually in single malts. So yeah.
Perfect. You mentioned that we use a new barrel from Kelvin Cooperage in Kentucky, and that's going to be at the end of the regular 14 years of age.
Correct. So it is a relatively short finishing period, because that brand new American oak will impart a lot of flavor very, very quickly. And what we don't want to do is overwhelm the spirit. We still want it to have that classic Glenfiddich sort of character to it, but with that little bit of sort of a bourbon kick, like a little Kentucky kick on it. So yeah, that's what you're gonna get. And for me, I think, coming from, I've sort of run the gamut in loving all different kinds of whiskeys. This one really speaks to me because I had that transition from bourbon to single malts. And it's a really cool bridge. There's even some sort of floral notes in there. There's lots going on. It's a super complex whiskey for 14 years.
I love it. Now, the 14-year age before that finish, what type of barrel are we using for that?
So we're also going to be using American oak, but those casks will maybe have been used once or twice before. So you're not going to get as much of an impact from, and not as much of a sort of bourbon-ish character. You're going to get that sort of more mellow American oak impact from a previously used barrel. So the full 14 years in that, giving it really nice, bringing out all those like fruits, that classic Glenfiddich character, and then that little pop at the end of just like pure American oak, brand new, kind of green, kind of grassy, kind of caramel. It's great in an old fashioned, actually. If you're a cocktail person, any kind of classic cocktail, this will also fit nicely into as well.
That's beautiful. Yeah, you can really taste that extra tannin, that extra wood spice from the barrel from that second.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Stunning.
Good.
Cool. So, one of the things I know we talked about before was this time of year, over the holiday season, it's such an important time for Glenfiddich's sort of history and story. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's well, we're here kind of close to the Christmas holiday, and William Grant himself was responsible for building the Glenfiddich distillery along with his children. And they actually, the very first spirit that ever flowed from the Glenfiddich distillery came in Christmas Day, 1887. So it's kind of a celebratory day in any way, but we really kind of really honor and appreciate that kind of even bigger celebration with, Glenfiddich kind of being born that day in a way. So it's always an exciting time of year. Always nice to get, a nice classic bottle of Glenfiddich in your stocking, and to even know that tidbit, to be able to tell, someone that you're gifting this to, that it actually has an even more special meaning for December 25th.
Absolutely. I always leave Scotch out for Santa.
I bet he appreciates that. Forget the milk and cookies.
Right? I hear he's lactose intolerant. A little scotch should go a long way, right?
Good for you, Joel. Good, good. He likes that. That's why you get extra special presents.
There you go, right? I'm greasing the fat man. So
that's right. That's right.
Shall we jump into the next one?
Absolutely. What do you got there? I see. Is it the 15?
This is the 15. Absolutely.
Excellent. Actually, one of my personal favorites. What a beauty. Actually, can we even talk just for a second about how lovely this new packaging is?
I was just going to say, yeah, absolutely.
Like, it's just so lovely. It's classic, but it's modern. So I think this is just such a nice new look for Glenfiddich. It's got that sort of like, in the middle, it's got that kind of like valley vibe, that triangle kind of vibe in the middle. And that signifies the valley. So the Valley of the Deer is actually Glenfiddich, what Glenfiddich means and stands for. So the Valley of the Deer is well represented on our lovely new packaging. But this Solera, our Solera Reserve, is my personal fave of the sort of core range. For this one, it's really interesting, actually. Our previous malt master, David Stewart, was sort of playing around a little bit. Experimentation is a really big part of what Glenfiddich does. Like, even, right from the get-go with William Grant himself, wanted to make the best dram in the Valley. And it was always pushing the envelope and trying new things. And this is kind of, part of that legacy. So, David Stewart was actually traveling around Spain and saw these really big, beautiful sort of Solera vats and decided that he wanted to try this with whiskey. So essentially we have this giant vat and we just keep topping it up with new oak, cask finished whiskeys, like reused oak, American oak, and European oak. So we're kind of always topping it up at the top, drawing it off at the bottom, and that is at least 15 years. So some of the whiskeys in that big vat have probably been there for years and years and years. So a really great way to sort of meld all the flavors together, let it mellow, let everything come together, and really shows in that sort of flavor profile. And that sherry oak really comes out really beautifully in this one, I find. Nice and rich.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, tons of sort of that black currant notes up top, some beautiful red fruit. I love it. So now that big giant Solera vat you're talking about, is that ever, like, every year when they marry, do they drain that vat completely for the bottlings, or does some remain in there all the time?
There will always be some remaining in there. I don't think it's been ever less than like half full. So we just kind of keep topping it up. And it's great if you get to go visit the distillery, you get to go like see it in action. So they'll actually take you and you can take a look at it and take a look into it. Don't drop your glasses or like what, like it's not part of the tour. But yeah, yeah, I know. I was really worried about that actually when I went. I was like, what if something drops in there? Like, what, do I have to go get it? Go for a swim in the Solera vat?
Worst ways to go, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's not that bad an idea. But no, I love this one. In terms of, value as well, a really beautiful 15-year-old whiskey that probably has a lot older whiskeys in it as well. And just a really beautiful sort of rich flavor profile, but really approachable. So again, being a classic Speyside distillery, we have those classic Speyside flavors. So more fruity, nice, like bright, sort of orchard pear, nothing too controversial in these ones. So really appropriate for kind of any level of whiskey drinker.
Beauty. Well, that's what I think, like I said, I grew up with Glenfiddich 12 in the house, like many of us did. And for me, especially later in years getting into Scotch like I did, I always look at Glenfiddich as being kind of that quintessential Speyside flavor profile. Yeah. And the nice thing I like about all of these is that we never lose that. Glenfiddich's been really good at just kind of adding little bits of gloss to the end and then little unique flavors to that core, right? To really keeping true to what it stands for. So I love it. It's great.
Absolutely.
Cool. Yeah, I had a question, but I forgot what it was.
It's because you're too enamored with
I'm
right now. You're just
into this. That's awesome. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this one is for me, kind of like, I almost want to call it a, if you know, you know, kind of whiskey, because so many people gravitate towards the 12 because that is their whiskey. That is their whiskey that they know, that they love, that they are kind of familiar with. This one is one that, you know, is kind of a bit of a sleeper hit. It's the one that, you know, the whiskey drinkers that kind of have explored the whole range a little bit more are kind of obsessed with. So that 15 is kind of, it feels like a little bit of a like open secret. So yeah.
Very cool. I do remember my question now.
Yeah.
You mentioned that, you know, this being, of course, a single malt, 15 years old, that there might be some older whiskeys in there. Can you explain how that's sort of possible? Obviously in the vatting, but.
Yeah, absolutely. So with single malt Scotch, if you have an age statement, which most of the whiskeys that are in the core range have, that number on the bottle has to be the youngest whiskey that's present. If you have older whiskeys, that's actually totally fine. And that actually often, yeah, absolutely. It often happens because what you're looking to do each time is create a specific flavor profile. And sometimes you might get 16-year-old and 17-year-old whiskeys that fit into that flavor profile, and that would work best in, you know, maybe a 15 rather than in, you know, waiting for an 18. So it's absolutely within, you know, the realm of possibilities that any of the age statement whiskeys that you enjoy might have some older whiskeys in there, which is great for balance as well. It helps balance out the flavor profile. And again, age statement isn't everything. And I think we're learning this more and more as we go along. You know, age statement doesn't mean quality. And so it just kind of gives you an idea of what you're going to find in that barrel. And so I think, you know, we're very lucky in that we've got so much old stock at, you know, William Grant & Sons. We're still a family owned and operated company, and we've been able to make some really important decisions kind of for ourselves throughout the years in the, you know, whiskey's boom and bust sort of period. So there is no shortage of older whiskeys at William Grant & Sons. So we're able to play around with that a little bit as well. So that's always fun. That's always nice. And it sort of gives an idea of, you know, what to expect from this whiskey. Is it going to be younger and brighter and a bit greener, or is it going to be a little bit more rich? Is it going to be a little bit more mellow? So yeah.
I love it. I think it's great. And one of the things that's so cool for me is that, you know, having gone to Scotland and visited these distilleries, no barrel is the same, right? So there's no hard, fast rule to, you know, on this date, we're going to pull it and it's the same every single year. You know, there's going to be variations. And so having the ability to sometimes pull in some older whiskeys, you know, really gives ultimately, I think, you know, the blenders more colors to paint with, and gives them that ability to sort of control the outcome, which I really love. I think it's such a dark art versus just a hard science, you know?
I love that you said that. That's so well said. A dark art. It is absolutely an art. And our malt master, Brian Kinsman, is very good at it. And it isn't a hard and fast rule. And you don't know what you're going to get when you open up that barrel.
It's like a box of chocolates.
Yeah. Exactly, Forrest.
Cool. Well, let's jump into the next one. This is probably one of my absolute favorites for the core line. I just, you know, adore this whiskey. So
yes, I'm guessing you're gonna put a hand on the 18 right here.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. The 18 is so lovely. It is so classic Glenfiddich because it's made from the same marriage of sherry casks, ex-sherry casks, and ex-bourbon barrels as the 12. So this is the classic. This is probably why you love it so much. It is the classic Glenfiddich 12, but with some real age on it. And even off the nose, that really, those mature whiskeys really do come through. Like, it is a whiskey you definitely want to be spending some time with. That's, you know, that's a celebratory whiskey. That's a whiskey that you save for the people that you like the most. But it's just such a beautifully balanced one. It does kind of remind me of like Christmas. It's got this like warm baked apple kind of vibe to it. It is like, and what I would say about the 12, the classic 12, is that it's got that like apple orchard. So you've kind of got like the journey of the fruit that goes from the bright greens of the apple orchard to, you know, baked with all kinds of spices and has a really beautiful warming sort of sensation to it. It's made in smaller batches than we would normally make our whiskey in. So we're just keeping it a little bit sort of tighter in the way that we produce it. So the best of the best barrels are in that one. And you can tell, right?
So I was going to say, you know, you talk about that sort of Christmas flavor and it kind of evokes that spirit. I grew up with a little British granny and she would always make Christmas cake. So if you've ever had Christmas cake, it's this like malty, doughy, very heavy loaf with like raisins and dried cherries and cinnamon, nutmeg, and walnuts. And this to me just reminds me of like, you know, that of Christmas cake.
That's it. I can see the menu forming in your head right now, what you're going to do over the Christmas season, what you're going to pair all your Glenfiddichs with. I can see it. I can see it happening.
Right on. Oh, I love this. You mentioned small batch. So, you know, how do you mean there? Like, are we using just a limited number of barrels, or is it smaller barrels, or what does that really truly mean?
Yeah, so small batch doesn't actually have like a legal definition. There is no legalities around it. Technically, what it means is smaller batches than usual. So we know that in single malt doesn't necessarily mean single cask. To make our single malts, we are marrying many, many, many hundreds of casks together to get our consistent flavor profile. So for this 18-year, obviously, you know, with the amount that we, you know, lose to the angel share, this evaporation, it's not super easy to get whiskeys to 18 years old. It's also quite expensive. You're paying for that whiskey to sit there and mature year over year over year. And so by the time you get to about 18 years, you don't have as many casks available to you. And will they fit into the flavor profile that you're looking for? Because as we said, it's not always a perfect game. So for the 18-year, we're using less casks. So we're going to be using around 100 casks instead of what we would use, which would be a couple hundred. So we're using many, many fewer just to get that really beautiful sort of rich flavor profile and that depth. So we're being a little bit pickier about the casks that we're going to be using for the 18. Yeah.
Great. Now, in those casks that we're selecting, are they all kind of American oak, or are some of them like full 18 years in European or sherry barrels, and then we're using a proportion versus a finish?
Exactly. So we're going to be marrying the full aged American oak and full aged sherry cask, and we're putting them together as opposed to what you said before is like the idea with the 14, which was finished at the end. So yeah, we're using I think it's about like a 60-40 split. So yeah.
60 American oak, 40 sherry.
Yes.
I love it. You can taste it. You know, it's that rich, vibrant, you know, stewed red fruit that it gets me. I mentioned before to you that I'm a sucker for anything with port into it, and you know, this kind of evokes a little bit of the softer notes of that, but yeah, that deep red fruit is, you had me at hello.
That's it. Yeah. that's the one you're going to hang out with later, I can tell.
Oh yeah, amongst others for sure. Yeah. But yeah, shall we jump into the sort of the next segment in the line? This is probably one of my favorite sort of segments of the Glenfiddich lineup to talk about with people. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about with it because they're so unique. So we're heading into the experimentals, and we release these every couple of years. There's, you know, usually a new one sort of peeking around the corner. Hint, hint. And you heard it here first. And so for this one, we're really sort of taking that idea of being, you know, William Grant and Sons idea of being, you know, kind of a maverick whiskey maker and, you know, doing things his own way, and forging ahead, kind of leading the pack. And we're lucky when you have, you know, a distillery that's as old as ours is, and that's large, you're able to, and you have someone as talented as Brian Kinsman at the helm, you're able to kind of experiment with cool, different things without worrying that it's going to really like affect your bottom line if you mess it up. And that's part of the reason why, you know, so many distilleries especially smaller distilleries have to stick to sort of their core range and aren't able to experiment as much. So we actually get to experiment a ton. The first one that you have right there, I believe, is the IPA. Mm-hmm. So the very first single malt finished in an IPA barrel. So
IPA beer.
Beer barrel finished whiskey. So this IPA that we worked on with the Speyside Brewery is alone. I've heard we don't want to drink this beer. This beer was specifically made to season a cask and then for our whiskey to go into it afterwards. So a very cool idea. Again, taking the idea of there being, we've spoken to the bourbon drinkers, and now we're sort of speaking to beer drinkers and saying, hey, there's a way we can sort of bridge this. It's bright, it's hoppy, it's zesty, it's citrusy. It is so good with a pint. Like they just complement each other really beautifully.
I always say, whiskey, especially Scotch in a pint, is like the happy meal for me. It's that perfect accompaniment. But one of the things I get, which is crazy, is, when I first saw this, I expected that I was going to get this, super hoppy, high IBU style IPA beer in concentrated form, and it's not bitter like that. Like there's not this really intense bitterness.
No.
But you're right. You said citrus, and that's bang on. Where does that come from?
I mean, that's just going to come from generally like the Glenfiddich flavor profile, because it is quite bright. This would be sort of, it's a no age statement. So it's on the younger-ish side. So you're going to get some of those like bright, younger, super like yellow fruits. And then, in these IPA style beers, you're also getting these undercurrent notes of like grapefruits as well, along with that kind of like the big, I always think of like IPAs as having like kind of a piney, like tree sap. Yeah, totally. But underneath that, there is actually a lot of citrus. There is some bright, grapefruit notes and some lemon zest in there. So I think you're getting it from those two different spots. But this one is definitely for me like classic summer dram. If you're a fan of a highball, like this is kind of, with a little lemon on the side, like this is kind of the one for you. So yeah.
Sure. And it's funny, I think a lot of people think of the concept of a single malt or Scotch whiskey highball as like absolute blasphemy.
Absolutely.
It's not, and having like gone to Scotland like yourself, I think when you get there and you realize that, we have a very, I guess, a stigmatized thought of what single malts should be and how they should be drank and what they're supposed to be. And that's why I love this lineup, the experimentals, is it, for me, opens a conversation of like, where is Scotch headed? And at the end of the day, if it doesn't taste good, it doesn't matter the number on the bottle, it's about flavor. So
exactly. Yeah. I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head there. And again, doesn't that just fit perfectly with the ethos of the experimentals? Let's not put our whiskey into a box anymore. Let's look outside the box and say, what else can we do with this? Like, let's make a cocktail with it. Let's make a highball. Let's, have some fun with it. Like, we don't have to have this idea of, sitting in a, smoking room with, I think we're over that now. So, and I think that's very much, even in the look of the bottles, like they're just kind of cool. There's lots to talk about with these. But I see your glass is empty. So I feel like we
You're absolutely right. I think we should.
I got an eagle eye, Joel.
Along there, I got an eagle eye too, and I'm going to bring up something a little later. I see in your shelf. Talk about it.
Yeah.
So this next one is really cool, and I love the story. I always say, to people when I talk about the Project 20, kind of lovingly. So I always say this is kind of like Glenfiddich bragging to me.
100%. Oh, I think that's a great way to put it, for sure. So this one is, when you look at the bottle, it says Project XX. But that's because we didn't want anyone to think that it was a 20-year-old whiskey. It is a mature whiskey, and you can definitely, it's more mature than the IPA. You can get that right on the nose. You can get those like kind of bit richer sort of flavor profiles. But it is called Project 20 because 20 brand ambassadors from Glenfiddich, this was before my time, boo-hoo. But my predecessor got her barrel in there, were actually let loose into one of the warehouses, and each one of them picked a barrel. And then our malt master, Brian Kinsman, made the magic happen, and all the brand ambassadors have a barrel that they chose that's in this batch. So there was 17 bourbon barrels, ex-bourbon barrels, 2 ex-sherry casks, and a port pipe. So there's a little port influence in there for you, Joel. Actually, like picked by our previous Canadian brand ambassador, Beth Havers. So it's like she knew that her colleague was a big port fan. And it really does come through on this one. Like, it's just such a neat one. And port barrels are not very easy to come by at Glenfiddich. They're kind of a bit of a unicorn. So very cool to have one represented in there. I'm sure you've noticed a little higher in ABV.
Mm-hmm. With the IPA, I noticed that they are kind of creeping up a little bit. This one is very smooth and complex, but it does have a little bit more sort of heat to it.
Absolutely.
And I'm looking, I see that it's 47% alcohol. Why have we done a higher ABV?
I think there is definitely a contingency in the whiskey market for people who love higher ABVs. A lot of people who are really, really into whiskeys enjoy a little higher ABV. It gives you an opportunity to kind of play with it yourself even a little bit. You can add a little bit of water if you feel like it's too much. And you can kind of choose your own adventure when it comes to it. But along with a higher ABV, if you're using less water in the process, it means you're going to get a lot more flavor in that bottle because there's less water. So just a couple reasons. I think, again, because it's the experimental series, I think we have room to play here, with the core that is sort of, we're looking at a wider audience. And for this, we're kind of looking for people who are, ready to try something a little bit different and cool. And that high ABV, I think, is a good spot. And for that one particularly, it is a bit of a show off of a whiskey, like beautifully made, high ABV, all the sort of non-chill filter, like that whole, if you're a whiskey person, all of these things are kind of gonna, tick that box for you for sure.
Beauty. Yeah, no, I mean, it's for me, this is probably one of the best, most complex and best values in the lineup that we're tasting today. It's outstanding value for what you're getting for it. And again, the complexity, the layers of flavor, when I say show off, I'm really talking about that, the ability to blend multiple casks of multiple different, origin together and get a cohesive flavor. I know some of the stories in the past about Glenfiddich being one of the pioneering companies of using cask finishing and re-racking in sherry and stuff. And this really is that, hey, this is how you do it, really.
It is definitely got some personality to it. It's got, everything for me. I do love high ABV whiskeys. It definitely fills that sort of gap in some of the lineup. I just this is the one. If you're that person who likes a really big, bold, rich flavor profile, then I would highly recommend grabbing a Project 20. Like, that's the one for you for sure.
Cool. All right.
Now, oh my gosh, the last one already.
Yeah, I know. This is, I could literally say about every single one of these, all right, this is my favorite.
Yeah.
I know. It's hard to pick a favorite, right? But
it is
so unique and such a cool liquid.
It is. It's very cool. It's sweetie peaty. It's absolutely an interesting idea in terms of, the way it's made. So we're talking about a peated malt. So you have that smoky sort of campfire flavor profile finished
this
in...
This is the fire and cane that we're tasting.
Fire and cane. Yes. Sorry, we didn't say that. And then finished in a ex-rum barrel. So you got the peat and you got the sweet. It's kind of like, it's almost like a cheese and like chocolate pairing, or like, when you get the I don't know if you like this, but like I love like the Chicago style, like like popcorn, where some of it's cheese and some of it's caramel. You have, and you think, oh my God, this is going to be weird. And it's perfect because it's sweet and savory. It's the best of both worlds. So, but still not overwhelmingly peated. So it's a very like Glenfiddich kind of peat. It's very soft. It's very aromatic. It's not briny. I wouldn't call it like oily. It's definitely got that bright sort of Speyside characteristic to it. But you tell me, you're nosing it.
Yeah, well, it's funny. You said Chicago style, and my mind immediately went to steak. And I was like, yeah, like, curry steak. I love it. But I have not tried caramel cheese popcorn. I will have to give that a try this Christmas for sure.
I think you'll like it. Yeah.
I love it. When I describe this to people, for me, I grew up first in the industry when I was very young. I was in kitchens and I was cooking and doing that sort of thing. So food is the first thing that pops to mind always for me when describing flavors, especially. And for me, I often describe this to people as like barbecued, sweet, sticky, smoky Maui ribs. This kind of like, unctuous sort of chewiness to it. There's a richness, a bit of a smoke, but you're right. There's not this, traditional iodine medicinal type of quality that you get. Are we using different peat, or is this like an Isla peat?
Yeah, this will be a different peat sourced from Speyside. So it's not going to have that ocean influence to it. And we're peating it quite lightly. I think at the end of the day, when all is said and done in the bottle, we're looking at around like 5 ppm. So not overly, when you get into the, as far as peat goes, when you get into the Isla peats, you're looking, you could be 35 or 40 ppm. You could get really, really super high into it. But what we're looking at here is about 5. So it's kind of like it won't linger with you as long as some other peated malts will. Like you're not gonna like a couple hours later be like, what did I drink? Yeah, exactly. It's yeah. It just kind of like softly dissipates and is just like, and then you got that beautiful sweetness, which is actually, there's a really beautiful texture to this whiskey. And I find peated whiskeys have a really nice texture to it. Just in general, I don't find it to be oily or to leave anything sort of afterwards, but I do in the mouth, on the tongue, I do think it has a really beautiful, silky, sort of smooth, really lovely mouthfeel. So this one's great. If you're already into peated whiskeys, you'll love this one. If you're just getting into peated whiskeys and want to like tiptoe a little bit, like this might be a nice one again to sort of bridge. But really cool idea. Like, again, experimenting. What's, like sweet and peat, like
for sure. Well, and to see a peated whiskey from not only the mainland of Scotland, but, from the Speyside area is incredibly rare. And it's something that you just don't see often. So for me, again, it brings up that conversation of like, should it be that way? Is this wrong? And for me, the answer is no. Do some cool stuff. Scotch is meant to be discussed and talked about and tried many, many times. I've always said that if you try it once and it's not really your jam, try it a week later. It might be different. And so
I definitely could not agree more. I think, it's so cool to have all of these single malts right in front of you that are so well made that you could, for any old day or occasion, just grab one and just know that you're going to get something that's really awesome, that has a lot of heart and soul behind it. That is, if you pick up a bottle of Glenfiddich, you're not going to be disappointed. And that's a really great, awesome place to be, especially for a brand ambassador. It's kind of awesome to just proudly stand behind, this product that I deeply, deeply love. I think tonight, the one I might love is Project 20, because I just got myself thinking about it. And I think that might be my, context is everything, right? So that's the context we're in right now. It's, I think it's time. Yeah. No, were you going to grill me on something back here? And I'm nervous. I'm like, I am. Yeah.
So I'm taking a little cue from what you mentioned earlier. When we talk about the 3 experimentals here, there was a 4th experimental that we had in market. Of course, this was the Winter Storm. Absolutely stunning. 21-year-old ice wine cask finish, like just so a cool gangbuster of a whiskey.
So cool.
And it's completely sold out. So now it's gone. It's discontinued. what we had was what we had and it's gone. Now you mentioned that there's going to be some new stuff coming along, and I noticed on your second shelf there you've got a bottle I think I recognize in the box. That's the one, yeah. Can you give us a hint about that? I know.
Yes, it should, any minute now it should be dropping in BC. If it's not already on shelves, it should be there very, very soon. And this is actually Grand Cru right here. Glenfiddich Grand Cru, 23-year-old, finished in a French cuvee cask. So just a little hint of, bubbles.
Yeah. Little effervescence and some
it is and it's so great, it's so elegant, it's sort of perfect for this time of year. It's definitely a special bottle, it's definitely something that you want to celebrate with, but again, 23 years alone is going to give such a beautiful shape to this whiskey, and then with that little sort of hint of French oak finish, just stunning. Yeah.
Now, these experimentals here, these core three, these are ones that are going to be sort of, made and kept regular. Is the Grand Cru going to be like the Winter Storm, where it's kind of a one-off and then we'll replace that high end with something different down the road?
So Grand Cru, as far as I know, is here to stay. So it's part of the sort of the Grand series, or the Grand series, that we have a 21-year-old Grand Reserva, which is a rum cask finish. Yep, there it is. I see it. Yes, that's right. That's you're going to say that for later.
And right here, right there above me. I've got two of them hanging out.
You guys have a lot more than I do. No, we don't have any. Okay, it's fine. And then there's also a 26-year-old cognac cask finish called Grand Couronne that has been released in the US and overseas. And hopefully we'll see it on our shores very shortly. I would hope so. But 2022 is going to be another great year for Glenfiddich, especially we're going to get to talk about Grand Cru some more. It's just sort of started being released over this holiday season, so we're going to get into the nitty gritty of it next year. And so those three, as far as I know, are here to stay. And then you might see a surprise experimental pop up, sometime as well. And the idea, like you said, behind the experimentals is kind of that they cycle through, so that it's not always a given that they're going to be around. We are sort of always experimenting. So it's a nice thing to sort of, if you like one, I highly recommend just grabbing an extra one just in case, because you never know. But that's the whole idea behind it, is that, let's try something else cool and new, and we'll maybe take this one away, and then so yeah,
leave them wanting more, right? Is always
having a little bit of fun, being a little cheeky.
Perfect. That maverick spirit you talk about.
That's right.
Beauty. Well, thank you so much, Jamie. This has been fantastic.
It's so fun.
I think of a better way to spend the evening is to sit with these beautiful drams. So I appreciate it. And,
my pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Joel. Bye.
Cheers.